right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you're listening to us. Thank you so much for joining us on this session. This is the part 2 of our two-part Making 2022 a Year of Meaningful Action live streams. Last one for this year. So thank you, whoever, whether you're out of office or not yet, has joined us. We really do appreciate that. And so today, as I mentioned, obviously, is the second part and last part to our conversation of making 2022 a year of meaningful DEI action and impact. And this is a conversation that we initiated last week with Hayley Bennett and Yasmith Sanchez when we were launching and unpacking the state of the internal DEI survey. And if you still don't have the survey, drop me a note in the comments or drop me a DM and I'll make sure I get that across to you, as there were some, I wouldn't say shocking, because I don't think there's anything that can phase us anymore these days, but definitely some very, very interesting insights for you to have a look at. Now, in terms of today's conversation, we're going to take it a notch further, and we're going to be talking about how we can foster cultures of well-being and belonging in 2022. So this is something that we also touched lightly in the previous session. And some of the things that specifically came out in that session were just how lonely the work in DEI can feel for those who are engaged in that work. And that sort of nicely eluded us into this conversation, because I felt that is a whole lot, different topic that we couldn't squeeze into the conversation last week. And so this is going to be something that we will be unpacking today. And I've got two amazing guests join me today, Marteka and Ash, and I will allow them to introduce themselves in a moment. But just to, before we do that, just to bring a little bit of context around this topic and what Hayley, so the guest from our last week's session, did a week ago. She posted this amazing visual, so you can check that out on her page on LinkedIn and Instagram. And she talked about, how working in diversity, equity, and inclusion impacts well-being. And there are various things that she listed there, and some of those things very, again, nicely tied into the last conversation. And she talked about how this work can get lonely and isolating, because often people who do this work are the only ones in this role, or they are the only people who look like you, or the only person who seems to care. There is a level of anxiety and stress caused from always being asked to do reactive work rather than proactive work, poor job designs, and many other reasons, and we'll unpack those in a little bit more detail as we go through today's session. But what and those really, really resonated with me, and I know they resonated with a lot of people who were watching us last week as well from the comments. And this topic is definitely something very, very close to my heart as well, because this year has really made me attend my health, really has made me to take time out and attend my both mental well-being and physical well-being, and really evaluate how I lean into this work, allowed me to pivot and assess how I want to contribute to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And also that has made me realize that I cannot have diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations without having a well-being conversation. So hence the diversity, equity, and inclusion ecosystem that I'm building, it has been that is going to be launched early next year, called Kuopa, which consists of two parts, and that is a diversity, equity, and inclusion accelerator and diversity, equity, and inclusion community. And so well-being is at the very, very core of both the program, the community, and the wider ecosystem. And just to remind you, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Accelerator will launch on 3rd of February. So there's still just a few spaces left on this first cohort. So please make sure, again, if you're interested, drop me a note in the comments, drop me a DM, and I'll let you know, and we'll schedule a call and I'll let you know more of details about this. And now I think it's a good time for me to take a break and to take a deep breath here and open up the space for both of my guests, Marteka and Ash. And just before the ladies introduce themselves, I want to say thank you once again to everyone who's joining us today or watching us in replay, as we will be unpacking the topic of fostering cultures of well-being and belonging in 2022. So, ladies, the stage is yours. I would love to tell for you to tell everyone just how amazing you are, and I really do appreciate for both of you joining me today here with your wealth of DEI and well-being experience. So, Marteka, shall we begin with you?
Thanks, Biba, and thank you so much for having me today. I hope you enjoy this conversation. My name is Marteka Swaby. I am a psychotherapist by background, and I have a company called Benevolent Health, and we support people through consulting and coaching. I also have a group called Kinship where we meet monthly, and we look at the intersectionality actually of race and mental health. And I think this really impacts how we experience belonging in the workplace.
I love that. Thank you, Marteka. I love that you mentioned the piece around belonging, because I think that is one of the things that organizations really strive for, but they attack it or try to achieve it with the not appropriate tools and from the wrong angle. So hopefully this conversation will build a little bit of context around how you should be doing it. So thank you, Marteka. Ash.
Thank you, Biba. So, hey everyone, I'm Ash. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and my background is from the automotive industry. However, I have a range of experience in HR, diversity and inclusion, and training and development. And I really help organizations to really create an inclusive work culture within their organizations, not just doing a one and done, but really creating, long-lasting, inclusive methods that they can just carry on, because like we always say, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a destination, it's a journey. So really helping those organizations with that journey. So thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you for reiterating that this is not a project with an end date and with an end destination. It is always an evolving journey. And even when you get there, you'll evolve on top of that always. Thank you, ladies. And anyone who has joined us today, I just want to remind you that we would love to hear from you. So drop us a hello and feel free to share in your thoughts, your insights, your reflections as we go through the conversation, and any questions you might have, because we have amazing experts on this panel today who will be able to pick those questions up. And so I guess where I would like to start the conversation is around how, again, how working in DEI impacts well-being. And as mentioned, obviously, we started talking about it last week, and this visual that Hayley put out went absolutely viral. So that already, talks about just how important and how much this resonates with people right now. And also in the survey that we launched last week, one of the questions that we asked to our respondents was how respected, how supported, and how resourced do they feel within their organizations, because those aspects are important and do contribute or chip away from our mental well-being, especially for people who are engaged in this work. And as they were asked to rate these 3 things out of 10, they rated respect 6.4 out of 10, support 5.9, and how resourced or how sponsored they feel the DEI space within their organizations are at 4.7. And I don't think these numbers are shocking in any way, but they definitely are disappointing, and definitely are a good place where to start thinking about how are we supporting and investing in the DEI space, but also doing it from a place of well-being and with belonging in mind. So, ladies, I guess my question to you is, from your work in this space, and obviously, Marteka, for you, through your group of Kinship, which is a group, a community designed for diverse women, and Ash, your work in mental well-being and diversity and inclusion, what are some of the things and some of the conversations and observations that you have noticed in this space of how working in DEI, and specifically people who are engaged in this work, how has that affected their well-being, especially taking into account that for the past 2 years we've been in the pandemic. So would love to hear from you on that. What have been some of your case studies or observations, and feel free to share in whatever you're comfortable with.
Marteka, do you want to go or shall I go?
Yeah, you can start, Ash.
Okay, no worries. So I think that since the pandemic, I think there's been this huge surge in bringing in DE&I, consultants, or there's jobs that have been opened up in this space. I think me and Bible, we were speaking about this, saying that Glassdoor in 2019 released a study where they showed that the increase in DE&I jobs had increased by like 75% in the last 5 years, and that was in 2019. So you can only imagine what the pandemic and what various things around the world, like the Black Lives Matter movement, all these things impacted that. So these jobs have absolutely surged. And I think the thing that you're finding is that people are very much beginning to understand, actually, we need to be at the forefront of this. Organizations are realizing the importance of this. It's not just a nice to have anymore, it's a needs to have. When we're looking at our consumers, when they're looking at vendors, people that want to work with us, these are really, really important. People want to make sure that you're aligned with their values. So they're bringing in all these people. So it becomes, sometimes you think to yourself, are they doing it from a place of reactive? Like, I just need to react to this. I just need to get this done. I need to bring someone in, and we need to focus on this issue right now because this is the issue that's going on around the world. But I think sometimes when you do it like that, it's good that you're realizing the importance. But when you're approaching it from a place of reactiveness, as opposed to being proactive and saying, okay, let's take a seat back. Let's understand where we're at as an organization, where we need to get to. I think that's where the problem becomes. Then it's this pressure on you bringing someone in to the organization. You're right. I need you to focus on anti-racism. Well, DE&I covers a whole load of things. Yes, that's a huge important aspect, but don't forget about everything else. And there's this pressure put on this person that you're putting out all these fires straight away, that you're not looking at a long-term plan. You're looking at just short-term quick fixes. And the person that's coming in, usually when you find people that work in the DE&I space, it comes from a place of real passion. Like, you really want to make a change. So when you're doing these things and you're doing these like short-term fixes, it ends up impacting you because you're like, am I really making a difference? Or am I just shooting fires here? And that can impact your well-being. I think that's a really important thing that we need to look at, is when we're bringing people in, are we just looking for those short-term quick fixes, or is it a long-term thing? And it should be a long-term thing. And if it is that, what support are we giving those people in that space? It's not just the case, you're the DE&I person. And, when we're looking at other organizations, when we're talking to other organizations, we say, yes, diversity, equity, and inclusion and well-being is important to us because we've got a person in that space. A person on their own isn't enough. You need everyone bought in. You need plans in place. Every stakeholder needs to be involved. Every stakeholder has a role, not just that one person.
I think you've covered there, a lot, Ash, and the things you talked about resonates with. So going back to strategy, being very clear about what the role is, investing in that space, both in the professional development of the person doing that work, as well as in the space in general, to make sure that they are resourced. Because otherwise, if they come into this space out of passion, then passion is great, but it's not necessarily going to create the meaningful, long-term and sustainable impact that we need to see in this space. Marteka, go on.
Yeah, I mean, just building on from what Ash was saying about sort of short, medium, long term, I think there perhaps has been a lot of reactive response to the external environment in terms of the pandemic, in terms of Black Lives Matter. There's obviously been a lot more spotlight on this area. So I think there is a pressure or a need for organizations to respond proactively. And, sometimes they don't get that right. It can be quick, let's create these roles and get people in. And I think it can be a really lonely place. I think any role where you are the only person in the organization, whether that's the only person of color or the only DE&I person or the only wellbeing person, I think that can be a lonely place, and I think it can be difficult to pioneer such a big, huge project. I think Ash is absolutely right. It needs to be, and also Yesh Smith touched on this in last week's conversation around this being really integrated in business strategy. For me, the work that I do in Wellbeing, I'm always very interested in how it sits across the organisation. I think when there's a single point of failure or one person's role, it's really hard actually to integrate and embed, across the organisation, but also for that person to take that on by themselves. I think it's actually too much of a responsibility. And if I was, looking for a DE&I wellbeing role, and I was expected to deliver all these outcomes by myself, then I certainly wouldn't be taking that on for my own mental health. I think, we also have a responsibility to say no and to push back on these things, because I think that that's helpful and useful to the people that you're going to serve, but also to yourself. I think, in terms of mental health and well-being, we have to orchestrate that to a certain extent and be responsible for, what we agree to show up and do.
I think that's such an amazing point that you make there, Marteka, because I think when a DE&I person comes in, they seem to be the expert in absolutely everything. They're going to be the trainer. They're going to be the person that does all your marketing stuff. And they're going to be doing all the comm stuff. And that's where it becomes difficult. You're one person, you're the expert in DE&I, you can help. And, me and Biba, we had this conversation, didn't we, Biba, where we spoke about them being the facilitators, but actually, the training, you should be liaising with the trainer and having these conversations like, let's build a training for, fighting discrimination, whatever it may be. But DE&I training sessions shouldn't be solely left on the DE&I expert, because the DE&I expert isn't a training expert. There's certain things that when I've done training and development, so I understand the training and development background, what you need to do when you're building a training course. And it's not just a case of, let me just talk to you about the definitions of DE&I. It so much more goes into it when you're really wanting to make impact, when you're really wanting to make change. And by putting that onus on just the DE&I person, okay, I was quite lucky that I have that training and development background. I can also look at policies as well because I have the HR background, but not everyone does. Not everyone is a marketing expert or a comms expert. That's why it becomes very lonely when you're expected to do everything. And that's why it's so important that we engage with all these different stakeholders, because everyone needs to recognize that actually we all have a part to play. We have this person facilitating these conversations and helping us on this journey to strategize, but it's not all on them. So I definitely agree with you when you say that it gets lonely, but it should never be like that. And also that pushing back. If someone comes to you and says, I need you to pull out a training session on, wellness. Well, okay, I've never done a training class before. A better conversation would be, I need you to work with the training and development specialist or the training team to create this. Can we please have your input? That's a much better conversation than saying, can you do that for me?
That's absolutely right. And I've got, there's some comments coming in, and Isaac is just reflecting on what you both have just said. And he says that absolutely this work is a team effort and everyone should be playing their part. And he continues by saying that one can lead, but the team must follow and help. Just to double down on the fact that, and especially, thinking about the fact that in most of the organizations that have any D&I presence and specific dedicated DEI person, it usually is one person or maximum 2-3 people doing this kind of work. And then, when we look around the organization, we have dozens or even hundreds of people in marketing, in technology, in finance, even in HR. And then in DEI, we have single digits. So absolutely, this work can't be about No, let me rephrase that. This work is about the delivery, but these people should be there to facilitate the conversation, facilitate the work, rather than do the work. And I think the conversation here is also about how we as DEI champions, change makers, practitioners, advocates, however we label ourselves, how do we contribute to this? Because if we do not push back, as Marteka said, or if we do not challenge what our role is and do not draw boundaries around the role, we end up at exactly where we are right now, where organizations are dictating what we need to do, and they treat us as project managers, as comms people, as HR people, and all of those things. But actually, for people who have been in this role, and again, quoting the survey that we launched last week, 70% of people, of the respondents in this space, had been in a DEI role for less than 3 years, and 42% for less than 12 months. So this space is still fairly young. Well, that's obviously also a myth, because it isn't. It's been around for a long time, but has been finally placed on the map over the past couple of years. And this is also a great opportunity and a historic opportunity for us to really define this role and standards in this role, and what we are doing, and what we are there not to do. Because right now, if we are saying yes to everything, we're actually creating probably more harm than good. So yeah, there's a role that organizations and system plays in this, but there's also a responsibility, I think, that we have to take as professionals as well, in terms of how much we take on and how much we actually push back. And there was another comment coming in from Peter, who's saying that awareness is absolutely key, and this will only come through training and conversation. So this absolutely is, where we should be beginning this kind of work. However, you both of you, the thing that both of you touched on was the strategy piece, and the fact that right now this work is very, very reactive. There are not a lot of boundaries around it, not a lot of standards around it, and not necessarily well-being people or DEI people are pulled into the strategy conversations right now. I do have some organizations are doing some strategy work, and again, going back to the survey that we launched last week, only 6% of the respondents mentioned creating strategy as one of the activities that they have been engaged in over the past 18 months. And again, not shocking from what we can see, however, really, really disappointing. However, I do have a hope that going forward, 2022 and onwards, that we will be engaging in strategy work much, much more. And as we are doing that, how does well-being should feed into the DEI strategy, as we've already established that we can't have a DEI conversation without talking about well-being?
I think that well-being and DE&I are really interlinked. I think that you can't create cultures of belonging without well-being, and I've always felt that working in mental health and well-being, that they're very closely aligned. I think different organizations are in different places in terms of how they're engaging on this topic. And I think we have to have an ambition actually to push beyond awareness. I think that kind of awareness and engagement is like, if you think about a triangle, that's the kind of the foundational piece to create awareness. But I think that organizations coming into hybrid and, moving into this new future of work, we do have to be ambitious that we go beyond just creating awareness. For me, I think it's really important that people feel contained. I think we need to create psychologically informed environments where people feel that they can bring their whole selves to work, that difference is tolerated, that we're able to experience difference. I think in some of the work that I've been doing with organizations, we've certainly been having brave conversations around difference, around our experiences with grief, loss, and what it's like to be different, and to be the only Black woman in the workplace, for example. So I think we have to have all of these brave conversations and feel heard and contained and share narrative, because I think it's important to add words, to be able to describe things and to name stuff. I think that's really, really powerful. And then if you were going to kind of go up to the top rung in the triangle, if you like, awareness and engagement's the kind of foundational piece. The middle piece is your kind of containment and having those brave conversations. Then I think there's something about really providing tailored support to individuals. I think when we talk about nurturing and retaining diverse talent, well-being really needs to be a key part of that. Mm-hmm. And I think that coaching and mentoring and really specific leadership programs that support leaders to be aware of difference and to tolerate difference. Because we've got different ideas of this. If it means that actually you come in and be the same as everyone else and tick the box, that's not quite it. So it's, how do we train leadership to be able to be aware of difference and tolerate it? But also, how do we provide a really tailored and nuanced piece to diverse talent in order to nurture and retain them? So I think there's different layers. And I think depending on where you are in terms of your strategy and what it is that you want to achieve, depends on how you sort of go towards this. But I think legacy wise, long term, if we want something that's sustainable, if we want an organization that's diverse and is doing really kind of creative, interesting stuff in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, then we do have to think about this really seriously, particularly from a personalized perspective.
And just to add on to what you just said, Marteka, I completely agree with, diversity and inclusion and well-being really do go hand in hand. And I love that what you said, awareness is just the basic level piece. And then when we get to the top, it's really about taking that action. And actually the personalized piece as well. I was having this conversation not so long ago. We were talking about mental health and well-being, since the pandemic. And I brought up this conversation where I said, well, actually, if we don't take into consideration what impacts people's mental health, which is a lot of, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, then we're not going to be able to tackle it. We can't look at it as we're just going to tackle mental health as a whole. We need to look at it as, okay, well, let's see what are the external things that are going on around the world. So when, the Black Lives Matter movement happened, when George Floyd was murdered, how many people reached out to their Black employees to say, are you okay? How are you? Just check in on them. I felt like there was this huge reactive, like, we need to get on board with this. We need a plan. We need to fight racial inequality in the workplace. But did we do that basic piece of checking in the well-being of our Black employees to make sure that they were okay? And I think it really comes back to what you said, Marteka, about that personalized piece, and also understanding that every organization is different. You need to understand where you're at before you can move on to the next piece. You can't just say, this is the plan that I have on a high level. You need to engage with your people. You need to talk to your people. And it's that middle piece, actually listening to your employees, letting them feel like they're heard, and then taking action. Because nothing is worse than me sharing my lived experiences, telling you how I feel, telling you how work has impacted my well-being from a person of color's perspective, and then you going back and doing absolutely nothing. So it's that piece, absolutely, awareness, engage with the stakeholders, and then you take action on a high level. And like Marteka said, definitely personalizing. I think that's so important. You can't just look at this from one lens. It's a very holistic approach, and you need to understand that everyone's on a different journey here.
Such important points that both of you have made, and I've jotted down some notes as well. It's been a lot of very powerful points made, and just sort of work, I guess, sort of backwards. First and foremost, what you just said, Ash, about asking your employees. And that's another thing that we touched on last week, about the fact that there is so much insight and so much knowledge that lives within our workplaces and workspaces. And we just don't do enough to check in with our people, but also ask for their lived experiences and for their input. And what we often do, exactly, we just go out and grab the first consultant to come in and again start strategizing when we haven't understood where we are, what our environment is like, and actually what are we trying to achieve with this? Is this just a bandwagon for us to jump on, or actually what are we trying to achieve with it as an organization, and how we are looking to lead this topic in the industry? So asking your employees is absolutely huge. I also love the both of you talked about the awareness piece, and this has also been something that I've talked a lot about as well, in terms of how much longer we're going to be raising awareness. And on one hand, it's for the rest of our lives. We're going to be reading them books and going to them webinars and speaking to our friends and colleagues for the rest of our lives. We're going to be raising our awareness all the time. However, at which point do we start taking some meaningful action and start implementing things? None of us want to get it wrong, but we will get it wrong. And that is another thing that we need to get comfortable with, and create an environment and space where that is not punished, where those lessons, where those failures are seen as lessons learned and opportunities for growth and opportunities to do better. But we can never do better if we don't make those mistakes. As innovation is a product of failure, discomfort is growth is a product of discomfort, and hence there's no way that we can build equitable places of well-being and belonging without at some point getting uncomfortable and having uncomfortable and unpopular conversations and getting it wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's a good. I think that's a really good point that you make, Baiba. I think so many organizations are a little bit scared because they don't want to get it wrong, so they're scared to take that first step. But it's absolutely what you just said there. Be okay that you're going to make mistakes along the way. You know what? Even as DE&I professionals, sometimes we may say something in a training session, or we may do something we may get it wrong. We're not perfect, and being okay with that, but just understanding that from that mistake, I'm going to learn from it. And I feel like this is sometimes such a huge problem when it comes to DE&I. Organizations are so scared of doing it wrong that they do nothing at all. Trust me, it's worse when you do nothing. You'll end up making, people will end up leaving you. Vendors won't want to work with you. They'll go work with someone else because you're doing nothing. Doing something is better than nothing. And I think it also gives your employees that little bit of confidence as well, that actually, our organization cares. They care about this.
Thank you for that. And Isaac has dropped a very interesting, a very insightful comment as well, saying that it is important to keep the conversation going. We can start conversations and get to conclusions to fix the situation, but things change all the time. People grow, technology improves. So we must carry on with the conversation even when we think that we have gotten it right the first time round and we've perfected it. Because what is right today can go incredibly wrong tomorrow, ultimately. And I think that's a very, very powerful statement. And again, goes back to the fact that we need to keep on evolving these conversations, and that there is no destination. There's just growth and where we keep on evolving. Marteka, did you want to say something before I mention something else?
I was just going to say that I think that the world's actually crying out for authentic leadership, and we are sick of this kind of cookie cutter model. I think that, where I see people with their own ideas and speaking their truth, I think that's really attractive. And, we shouldn't be afraid to say what we think about things. I think that I think in some ways we've lost the kind of ability to debate and to reason with each other. I think that, if you don't have the kind of acceptable standard that everyone else thinks, if you think a bit different, then I think that somehow is dangerous. And I think there's real opportunity actually in being able to explore difference and being able to understand people's lives from their point of view. So, as a Black woman, my experience is going to be very different to a homosexual man, for example, a white man. And so, to be able to talk to each other about our experiences, we're going to learn from each other. And I think that we shouldn't be afraid of that. I think there's real opportunity indifference to grow and to understand different things. And I don't think we have to agree either at the end of the day. I think that the point is that, you know, we're open to have these conversations, and they shouldn't be seen as dangerous, or, you know, that we have to be really careful, or I think we should be mature enough and adult enough to be able to have, you know, these difference of opinions. I think that's what's good. I think that's what adds variety to organizations. That's what makes it more exciting in a way. And, you know, I'm not saying that we should just hurt people and say horrible things, but I think we need to encourage that, and stop being so conformed and what I call cookie cutter.
Sorry, Barbara, do you mind if I add just something there?
Please do.
You know what, Marteka, that's such a brilliant point. And sometimes I feel like when DE&I professionals come in, they come in that I'm going to speak my truth, I'm going to speak the truth and allow people to have that. But sometimes another thing that ends up impacting their well-being is you end up becoming this echo chamber, because you realize very early on that the senior leadership team or the organization doesn't want you to speak that truth, because does it make them look bad? And I think that's a very dangerous place to be in. So 100% we need more authentic leaders that allow these conversations. You know, just from my own personal experience, a few times I've spoken about me being a Muslim woman and things that have happened in the world that have impacted me from my perspective, right? And my perception is real because I'm living that. That's my truth. And every time I've put up one of those posts, I remember the first time I did it about, it had something to do with, my faith and my beliefs as a Muslim woman, and then the perception that people have of a Muslim woman, especially one that wishes to cover up, wears the burqa, and then someone that doesn't. So like Kim Kardashian put up, she was wearing that full black outfit. And, I said, okay, one woman's oppression is another woman's liberation, because this, Kim Kardashian was seen like this fashion icon. I'm like, hold on a second. If you look at them, they look so similar, but you're saying that we are oppressed if we choose to wear, because I've got people in my family that wish to cover fully as well, but that's their own personal choice. And I remember putting up a post about this, about my personal views and how it made me feel. And my God, like you said, no one wants to debate anymore. People just want to attack you. But there were people that came, so many people came out and supported me, and people that were being not very nice in the comments. Other people were coming in my defense and having those conversations with them. That was the first time I ever experienced something like that. And honestly, like, it really impacted me, my mental health. I was like, oh my God, because we've been for so long, we want people to like us because we've always wanted to fit in, right? And I've gotten to a place now where I'm like, I don't care if I don't fit in. Like, you need to fit. If I'm not for you, then I'm okay with that. Like, I'm for some people and I'm not going to be for everyone, and I'm okay with that. But I remember looking at that and I was like, people don't even want to see it as, this is my perception, this is my lived experiences, this is what I'm saying. It was just attacking me. And this is what sometimes we're so afraid to have those conversations because of the pushback that we're going to get. We're going to get told, no, you can't have those conversations. So what you said there, Marteka, really resonated with me, because I'm like, we absolutely need more authentic leaders. We absolutely need to be able to speak our truth, because we will never get to a place of belonging if we don't allow these conversations, if we don't allow people to speak their truth.
And I can't remember where I heard this, and I don't know why I associated when I was in a room where Ava DuVernay was talking on Clubhouse, and I think she was the one who said that we need to be able to speak our truth, speak with passion, and yet still be able to leave the debate with mutual respect for each other.
Yes.
And I think that is what is massively lacking right now, in the conversations, because right now it feels like everything has to be polarized. There's nothing in between. If this is my opinion and my lens, then I can't accept anyone else's. And we see that in politics. We see that what's happening during the pandemic right now. We see what's happening in race relations right now. And it's actually very, very concerning that gap between black and white, right or wrong, red or blue, is becoming larger and larger, and we are finding less and less common ground. And hence, again, going back to the fact that creating spaces, safe spaces for brave conversations, or conversations in general, where you don't get cancelled or punished, or that is not being held against you, is more vital than ever. And another thing I wanted to pick up what Marteka said earlier was around, how where do we go when we experience grief and sadness? And it's very interesting that you brought that up, because this week alone, I have had the conversations with two people in different places and from different backgrounds, specifically about this. And it was also David McQueen who posted a very vulnerable video on Instagram as he was going for his morning walk, and he was just reflect on the fact that he was, feeling very sad that morning. There was no sort of real potentially reason for that. But where do we go when we experience, sadness and grief? Where are those spaces for us? Because often, we operate with joy and success, but when we are feeling low, which are absolutely normal feelings.
Bye, you've cut out.
She's gone.
Yeah, I can't hear her either.
She's mid-flow.
She was making a very valid point there.
Oh dear. Oh, I'm sorry you got that response, Ash. That was unkind.
You know what? But I got to a point, Marteka, where I said to myself, do you know what? I'm okay with that, because like I said, I'm not for everyone. And I feel like I was unlearning so many behaviors that I probably picked up. Not like I mean, I loved the company that I worked for. I am who I am today because I picked up so much from there. But sometimes you feel like you have to be a certain way, and you don't realize that until you come out of it and you think, okay, well, now I feel like I'm able to speak my truth, because before I could potentially be impacting a company name or whatever it may be. Sorry, Bye, we just tried filling in for you because you cut out a little bit. You were mid-flow, like really going for it, and then you cut out.
Yeah, no, just my internet. So thank you for that. Thank you for carrying on. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of comments that, this has really resonated with a lot of people. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So we've got Sobia, who's joined us today as well. And she loves the point about making mistakes and learning, and how vital it is to create spaces for making mistakes and growing from those spaces. Gary is saying, mic drop, Ash, we need to be able to speak our truth. And all of our truths are our truths, and they're all valid. Thank you. Thank you for those very insightful comments and reflections, everyone. And so as we continue the conversation, and as we move into 2022 with hopefully some silver lining there, and with a bucket of lessons learned that this pandemic has given us, 2020, a year that no one remembers anymore, 2021, how do we walk into 2022 from a place where we want to do better? And how do we foster cultures of well-being and inclusion and belonging within our spaces, within our workplaces? Any tips and tricks that you can share?
There's so many things I feel like that can be done in this area. And, one thing that Marteka mentioned is the authentic leadership. I actually ran a webinar which was titled Inclusion Through Authentic Leadership, because I feel like when you really come from a place of, you know what, I don't know everything, I've not experienced everything, I don't know how that made you feel, but I can empathize with you, I can understand, and I want you to feel heard. Like, I think that's a first step. Like, our senior leaderships really need to come from a place of authenticity. Be vulnerable, like be okay with showing people that I don't actually know all the answers. I'm not I don't know all the solutions, but I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to learn, and I want to take action. Because I think when you're able to see that you'll see a huge shift in your employees wanting to speak up as well. And I think also engage with your employees, like listen to them. I always say, whenever the first piece, like we're in the very early stages of our journey for well-being inclusion. And I always say the first step should be, do you know what your employees are feeling right now? Because you can't put any strategy in place until you know exactly what the culture is within your organization. Once you understand that, then you can start taking the necessary steps. Is it training? Is it marketing? Is it communication? Is it a whole cultural change? Is it our middle management team need better training on how to support their employees from different backgrounds? That's when things start coming up. But the first piece I always start off with is listening to your employees, engaging in conversations with them, and allowing them to feel like they've been heard. That's where I'd start.
I'll just build on that then, Ash. Thank you for kicking us off. That was a really good start. I think that engagement is really, really key. I would say to all leaders, particularly if you line manage someone, if you're a strategic leader in the organization, I think getting someone's name right and being able to pronounce it properly is such a powerful thing to create a culture of belonging. And so I really encourage you to, to pronounce someone's name correctly and learn someone's name. And I think as well, like for everyone, I think DEI well-being is everybody's responsibility. You are the thermostat. We are all the thermostats. We can change the temperature of the room. So, we don't have to be silent on things that we see that, offend us or offend our colleagues. We were just talking about kind of sharing narrative around grief, around you shared your story, Ash, on being a Muslim female and that experience. Let's have these conversations. We don't need to wait for a strategy or, to be in a safe space to have these conversations. We can start to do that. We are the thermostat. So I encourage you, wherever you are, to change the temperature by showing up and being you.
I love that, Marteka. I'm the thermostat. We all are the thermostat. Also, I think another piece that we need to start doing is, I think sometimes we're so afraid of, not everyone's bought in on this journey. And the thing is, me and Bye-Bye, I had this conversation with you. We can't change everyone. We're not here to change anyone, actually. All we're doing is we're starting those conversations. And I think now within an organization, accountability is so key. We need to start holding people accountable. Are promotions being based upon, people's efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are they doing in that space? Because if this is a person that's going to be a future leader, but they have done nothing to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion and well-being of their employees, do they deserve that title as a leader within the business? These are the people that are going to be running your organization. They're going, the senior leadership team. What are you doing to hold these people accountable to make sure that they're on that journey? Managers as well, because sometimes, regardless of how much we bang that drum, not everyone is going to be bought in. But when they are being held accountable, when it becomes a case of their promotion is based upon this, then things will change. You can't change people's, deep-rooted beliefs, their values, what they've been brought up with. You can't change that. But if you're holding people accountable, if you're raising awareness, if you're constantly talking about this, then maybe along the line that shift will happen. But if we're not doing none of that, if we're not holding people accountable, people will just be like, okay, it's a nice to have. I don't really need to do anything. When we're talking about promotions, one of the things people looked at is how many people have you got promoted? Well, let's look at how many people of color, how many women, how many, LGBTQ people you've got promoted. What have you done to sponsor these people? How many people have you mentored? Those are the real differences. Those are the real changes. These are the leaders that we want for the future, not just people that can just do the day-to-day job, tick boxes. None of that. It needs to be more authentic. It needs to be, how many people are you bringing along with you?
Thank you for those insights, ladies. And I would just like to double down on them and then echo what you've just said in terms of what can organizations do to foster cultures of well-being and belonging in 2022. And if I had to sum it up in three things, what I've heard from both of you right now is that, first and foremost, listen to your employees. There is so much knowledge, wisdom, and insights that live within your organization, within the walls of your organization. Do not underestimate that. Secondly, build conscious behaviors. You don't need a strategy to get someone's name right, or you don't need a strategy to get someone's pronouns right. So build conscious behaviors, and especially this applies to leaders. And lastly, create safe spaces for brave conversations. Again, as Marteka said, you do not need strategy for these kinds of things. You can start those conversations today and support your employees that way. And we've got a couple of comments that have come in around this as well. And everyone loved the analogy of the thermostat. Gary saying we are all thermostats. We can change the temperature in the room. Another mic drop there. And Isaac is also saying that he enjoyed that analogy because changing the temperature in the room is something that we can all do. Thank you very much for that. Also, someone whose name I can't see because of their settings is saying that being accountable means measuring their achievements. 100%. I think it's even more than achievements. It's about growth, about personal responsibility, and how we are walking this world from a space of consciousness. But absolutely, accountability is something that is lacking not only in the D&I space, but in the corporate and our workspaces in general, in any capacity. And that accountability piece is absolutely crucial. And ladies, as we are coming to an end of our session, I would love to, and we've talked so much, and there's some amazing case studies and amazing things that you have raised, and some really tangible things that people listening to this now in live or replay will be able to take away. But if you had to share some of the final thoughts or give some sort of calls to action to organizations as we are wrapping up and closing out the year, what would be some of the things that you would like to leave us with?
Marteka?
So I think if I was going to build on getting people's names right and be the thermostat, I think that the safe spaces conversation is really key. I think that people feel validated when they're heard. And so, if you have the ability to do that within your organization, I think that's really, really key. If you don't, I think that you can liaise. Ash talked about working with a broader team. If you don't have the resources internally to utilize from outside, Biba, you talked about your community that you're building in terms of skills and experience. And also you can drop into the first Friday of every month. I run a safe space for diverse women, where we talk about mental health and race and that intersectionality. And so anyone that's out there is welcome to attend. And
just to add to what Marteka said, I think for me, it would be when you're bringing in someone into the D&I space, don't put the onus all on them to do absolutely everything. Eventually, they'll get burnt out. They'll end up leaving. And then you sit there and think to yourself, I brought in a D&I person and I couldn't even engage with them and keep them. So it's really understanding that your D&I person, or even if it's a small team, don't think that that's just their department. Every single person within the organization has a responsibility, right from entry level all the way to senior leadership team. We all have a responsibility, and it's understanding, what am I doing? What part am I playing? Don't just sit there and think, oh, I'm not doing anything because we've got a diversity and inclusion person in our organization. Absolutely not. We all have a responsibility. What are you doing? Always look internally and say, don't look at everyone else. What am I doing to make a positive impact? What can I do within my team? What can I do amongst my peers? What can I do, for the wider, whatever it may be? If you're someone, like I remember I wanted to, I needed a place to pray, and actively asking for that. I wasn't going to sit back and not say anything. I needed a place to pray, so I asked for that. And it was that asking that created the catalyst to become, we need a place, a proper place to pray. We need a room. And it's all about, when you speak up, when you tell and ask for things, don't ever think, oh, they don't have one, so, you know, they don't believe in that, or they don't accept that. Have those conversations, because you'd be pleasantly surprised about the changes that you can make as an individual. And I had nothing to do with diversity and inclusion when back in those days when I asked for that prayer room, but those are the catalysts. So everyone has a responsibility, and I think it's really important that we recognize that it's not on one person, it's not just on the senior leadership team, not just on the management team, everyone across the board, across the whole organization.
Thank you, Ash. And I guess, you know, what you're talking about is for all of us to take radical responsibility about the role that we play in the society, in our families, in our workplaces, and ultimately build from there. And so I just noticed that the person who made the comment about the accountability is Peter Moore. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, because Peter Moore's daughter, Michelle Moore, is a fantastic leadership coach and engaged in the D&I space. And she has just dropped her book, Real Wins. So if you haven't got it, make sure you do. Michelle Moore is doing an amazing job in this space. But ladies, thank you so much for all of these insights, for sharing some of these very practical tips. And I love, Ash, what you talked about, you know, our individual responsibility. And another thing for the organizations, have a look at your job descriptions. If in your job description you do not have a line about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what role does that person, regardless of their entry level or leadership, plays in diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's probably a great place to start. Again, you don't need a strategy to do that. That is just one activity that will make a huge impact. And these are, you know, everything that we've talked about today around creating safe spaces, you know, what actions we can make. And both Marteka and Ash will also be experts and mentors in the co-op DEI community and ecosystem, where we will be. It will be a game. I think it will be a huge game changer, because what we're going to be doing collectively is creating and raising the standard for the DEI work, or creating one in the first place, and ultimately raising a new generation of DEI experts who lean into this work from a place of capability and confidence, and also from a place of clear boundaries to make sure that their mental well-being is not being affected by the work and by everything that we internalize doing this work. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, both. Again, to reach out, feel free to drop me a DM, connect with Marteka and Ash, and go to Lake House website, drop your email in the contact list, and I will make sure that you get all the latest things that we are doing in your inbox weekly. So thank you so much, both. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to all of us, and thank you, audience, for being, for anyone who joined us in live, for being so active and sharing all of your insights. And for those who are watching in replay, that's a hello to you as well. Thank you for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in new LinkedIn Lives next year. And I'm wishing you a wonderful holiday time. Recharge, rejuvenate, because next year is going to be all about meaningful action. Thank you, everyone.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Happy holidays. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.